evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another week of the Next Level Broadcasting Show. I am Eric Huffman, joined this week by Tom Clementson, Jared Stamen, and the man behind the desk, Charles Strail. Again, welcome to getting into week 4 now of the high school season. We've got a jam-packed show today. We'll go over last week's games, dive into college football, Michigan State, get into a little bit of Detroit Lions, and then we're going to go into the world of boxing for a little bit with Tom Clementson. But right now we want to get into our first segment of the night, which will be last week's high school football games. And Jared, you and I did a really fun game. I guess it ended up being kind of the game of the week from Next Level World last year. We were just up the street at East Jordan with Kalkaska coming down to play the Red Devils, and kind of a back and forth game. Like the game went for pretty much the whole game, with Kalkaska edging out in the end 24-20, giving East Jordan their first loss.
Yeah, it was really kind of the game of the week for sure, I'd say. After we'll go over some of the scores, you'll see why. But Kalkaska came into East Jordan. They're both 2-0 teams, and one of the things we kind of talked about pre-show is 2-0. Are you a real 2-0? Your schedule, how is it? How does it really fare? This is going to define who is the real 2-0. And we both came in thinking East Jordan was going to really come out there, potentially have a 20-plus point victory. And, well, surprisingly, as you're going to see with some of these highlights, Kalkaska ends up sneaking away with a win here. Ended up, his final score is 24-20, as we're going to throw in some highlights here.
Yeah, we had thought, East Jordan had just come off a 51-0 drubbing of Joburg, and Kalkaska had a couple of close wins. So we really, on paper, just thinking that this wasn't going to be a close game. Our buddy Charles was thinking different, and obviously it was all smiles when we gave him the results afterwards as we're getting into some highlights here. I believe that's Wilson on a long bomb in the first half. After they were kind of dinking and dunking and opened up that long game for the bomb for that first score. And then we're get some Kalkaska action here. Seidelman, the running back, 150 yards on 13 carries, man. He really hauled the load last week. Yeah,
he kept the Kalkaska team in it. Anytime East Jordan kind of ran away and would score back on offense, Kalkaska would come and Seidelman would come and tear off a 30-yard hard run, breaking multiple tackles.
We weren't sure if missing, was it Ward from East Jordan?
Max Beal,
Max Beal, there we go. Max Beal, my bad on that. Being a linebacker and whatnot, was going to hurt the East Jordan defense, with Seidelman getting most of his yards in between the tackles.
Yeah, and as you're going to see here, East Jordan does score with about under 3 minutes left on the clock, and we thought right here it's kind of been a bit of a slugfest. And East Jordan, good win. They took a lot of the clock down, thinking, okay, this is the game. This is how we're going to end it. And right here, we're going to see the real pivotal point in the game.
So setting this up, I've been told for the last couple of weeks about the special type of kickoffs that East Jordan had been running, and I believe they run two different people for this kickoff.
They sure do.
And it almost looks like an onside kick. But what happens during this one?
Is they kick it a little bit short to about the 40-yard line here. We didn't know if they were going to try and just kick an outside and try and get possession, but they gave it to them with short field, and they didn't even really need the short field. They run this back for a touchdown. And with under 3 minutes left, and East Jordan could not find the room to come back after that touchdown. All the momentum swung onto their sideline, Kalkaska's, and that was really the pivotal moment in that game.
And all we had seen during highlights in the games that you've done so far were those short kickoffs. And so you never know, if just trying to kick it all the way down the field as far as you can would have made a difference in the game. Would Beal have made a difference in the game in that? Obviously, we expected East Jordan to win. Kalkaska comes out with the victory in the end. But my one comment to you at the end of the game was, although one team lost, it looks like both teams are on a run towards the playoffs.
Yeah, I think both teams did look pretty good there. East Jordan with a bit of blunders, but like you said, they are missing Max Beal, who is debatably a top 3 player, the heart of the defense at that middle linebacker spot, and they're starting running back, and Garrison Henry, the sophomore, came in and tried to fill his shoes, but those are pretty big fills to big shoes to fill for the young sophomore. But he tried, but I think Max Beal ended up being a big injury that definitely did not help East Jordan.
Let alone sentences to finish, right?
Yeah.
So moving on, obviously we're pretty in depth with this game, as Jared and I were both there. We'll move on to our next game, which Tom was at last week, talking about sentences. Gaylord St. Mary's playing host to Forest Area, and Gaylord St. Mary's ending up still being 3-0, and kind of another drubbing as far as this game went. And Tom, you can go ahead and get in depth with that one.
Yeah, so this is one too that was kind of interesting. We were without some key players in this game on both sides, right? So Forest Area was missing their Their big senior quarterback was not available, didn't dress. I don't even believe he was at the game. We had our starting quarterback, Nathan O'Connell. He's also a starting linebacker. And it's interesting. We'll talk a little bit more about that toward the end of this a little bit. But so O'Connell was out dressed, but they kept him out. Let's see, Logan Greenier was also limited. They played him about a quarter. And, Logan's one of those guys that they line him up as a defensive lineman, and they also run him in the backfield. He's been really, really good in the backfield.
I believe there's a highlight that you'll see where he just kind of has the ball and just kind of gets his two arms around it, puts his head down. It's like, who's going to get in the way?
Yeah, well, and what's interesting is it doesn't even highlight the guy's real skill because he's got really nice vision. He does a really good job being elusive, too, when he wants to be. So he's not just, the Ron Dane type of runner. He's got a lot of facets to his game. But what this did provide was an opportunity for the Gaylord team to really kind of open up the playbook a little bit with some of the guys, the 2s and the 3s, that normally aren't going to get some game experience because of those injuries. And we see right off the bat, this is Durecki, who's a senior, but he doesn't see a whole lot of time in the backfield running the ball. He's kind of a second or third option usually for running back, but he found some big holes. And what we see too is a sophomore QB2, Joe Jacobson, who had himself a tremendous game. Just really good decision making with the ball. Really good when he had to throw it downfield, and you'll see he links up twice. Once in the fourth quarter with Cal Royce, originally from Boyne City, and just a really nice throw, nice tight spiral. We also saw Eli Switalski, who's another sophomore quarterback. He's kind of third in that order, 2A, 2B options. But Eli also played a really good game. Each of those guys got about a half. The real difference, though, in terms of some of the changes that they made really had to do with the offensive line, with Charlie Cameron also out, who's obviously probably the most physical presence with St. Mary. With Charlie being out, they had to move some folks around, and you saw, if you watch that game, you see some massive holes open up for those backs, and the edge being sealed off. They did a great job with moving those guys out there, sealing off the edge, and Durecki had all kinds of room to run.
My quick question for you would be: obviously, they're blowing people out, and they're playing. They're getting the 2s and maybe the 3s in.
Right.
When you're blowing people out, it's really hard to be 4 quarters in shape. How are they able to stay in 4 quarters shape when you've got players getting rested in the second half?
Well, I mean, it just goes to show you how deep the team is, right? And so part of it is, good conditioning, and they continue to work hard at practice, and they continue to work hard in the weight room. But it's also being able to, utilize those 2s and 3s. In fact, I had a chance to talk to Coach Kevin O'Connell, head coach there for Gaylord St. Mary, and he talks about how important those 2s and 3s are.
Awesome, and we're going to get into some of those interviews here toward the latter part of our show tonight. But right now, we're going to move on to our third game from last week. Charlevoix traveled to a nice short trip to Tawas, and they also moved to 3-0 with a big 54-7 win. Charles is getting the highlights ready. Shane Smith and his crew covered that game, so we're going to try to get through some of these highlights. But when we were watching them earlier, it seemed like the Garrison Starrett and Ian Moran show, Charles.
Yeah, the two of those guys really put the team on their back early on in this game. They were able to get the Raiders kind of off the schneid. As you see, that opening drive touchdown went in, and a nice little short out route. And then here you see Garrison Starrett breaking this one loose, and nobody was catching him. He's got some wheels, and he's got the Starrett bloodline enabling him to really break off some of those explosive plays. I believe that's Garrison's second touchdown of over 60 yards on the season. He had one week 1 versus Unionville Sebewing 2. Actually, Starrett scored the first touchdown for the Raiders this season. Here you see an answer back by the Tawas Braves, but after that, it was pretty much all Raiders.
Yeah, again, you hear Moran's name 3 or 4 times during these highlights. I hear Jess and Warchal and Starrett, all of them hauling the load and coming out again with the big 54-7 victory. So again, a good job by Charlevoix, and moving on to next week. And so we will move on to our fourth game covered last week. And we got some brief talk about this. We had some technical difficulties last week, but we had something great happen as Elk Rapids, the Elks, getting their first win of the season and not only getting their first win of the season, getting their first points on the board for the season. A big 8-6 victory, going down to Oscoda with a long drive and coming back home with their first win of the year. Braden Flutie scoring the first points for the Elks on the year, so congrats to him and good job by the Elks, as I will be down there tomorrow to cover their game at home tomorrow against Sheboygan, and we'll get into that later.
That should be a pretty good one there, Eric. I know for a fact that the Sheboygan Chiefs kind of stole one versus Elk Rapids last year, and I think a lot of those Elk Rapids players that are carryovers from the 2024 team know what it's like to give away a game, and you'll get into that later on. But last year, Elk Rapids and Sheboygan, if you didn't see it, it was a great game. We had it on Next Level Broadcasting last year, and it was a barn burner. Sheboygan pulled out an absolute stunner where Elk Rapids probably left thinking, man, we just gift wrapped them that game.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we'll get more into it when we get to the latter part of the show tonight. And now we'll get into our last game from last week. Traverse City St. Francis was at Benzie Central, taking the short trip down there, and moved themselves to 3-0 with a big 56-20 victory over the Huskies. And Charles, you got the highlights for that game.
Yeah, this one was pretty self-explanatory after looking at that final score. Right away, the Gladiators struck first, and they were just able to push it in there. That's Evan Bellinger with about an 8-yard run. Next up, we've got a nice extra point by Sam Wildfong. Sam Wildfong proving to be a very accurate field goal kicker. This is a 65-yard touchdown run by Daziak, and Daziak has been showcasing his ability to really stretch the defense. And here's a nice little run cut back by Cooper Sellers getting into the end zone there. And then the Gladiators are going to fumble on this possession here in the end zone, and it's picked up by the Huskies for the first points of the game by Benzie Central. That made it 34-7, and that was a big score, but look at this little wheel route down the sideline to Braxton Lisinski, put on the money by Tyler Endress. Benzie did answer back, though, right before the midway mark of the third quarter with this nice touchdown run here to put it 42-13. They would make that extra point, and then the Gladiators able to get some of their seniors in. I want to make a special mention here because this is actually a touchdown run by defensive nose guard Michael Frederick. So they put him in the backfield here and let the senior get a chance to tote the rock. And we had Michael Frederick on the post-game show last week, and he gave a huge glowing shout-out to the coaching staff for allowing him to have the opportunity to carry the ball. Here's Cooper Sellers taking this kickoff all the way back for, it was about an 82-yard return, got it down inside the 7, and then the Gladiators would punch one more in for the touchdown here, and that would pretty much do it from Benzie that week. And the Gladiators took this one. It was not really close, 28-0 at the earliest point of the game. 34-0 was the greatest margin before the Huskies were able to get on the board. The Gladiators will take on Grayling this week, and we've got some more stat packs to kind of unpack as it pertains to the Gladiators versus Grayling all-time series season record, and it's going to knock your hair off, Jared. It already knocked Eric's off, but it's going to knock your hair back when you see this statistic that the Gladiators have all-time versus the Grayling Vikings, because it will make you go, whoa, wow. So that's something that we'll be able to get into and unpack as we continue to proceed on the Next Level Broadcasting show. Eric, what do you got there?
Oh, thanks, Charles. That's going to do it for our high school highlights from last week. We're going to take a quick break, but after our break, when we come back, we'll talk Michigan and Michigan State football. Was last week a turning point for both teams, or is there still work to be done in establishing who they are, establishing an identity? Right now, we're here from one of our sponsors, BC Pizza. You are watching the Next Level Broadcasting show. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. What I'll do is I'll read through that, and then I'll open it up for quick comments from each person, and then I'll read the statement.
All right, guys, here's what we get.
BC Pizza, BC Pizza, hometown handmade gourmet.
Coach,
do?
We get BC Pizza.
BC Pizza, BC Pizza.
And we're back. Thank you for joining us on the Next Level Broadcasting Show. Eric Hoffman, Tom Clementson, Jared Stamen, and Charles Strail in studio with you this week. Right now, we want to dive into Michigan and Michigan State football. Turning a corner or more work ahead? Well, right now, we'll get into the University of Michigan, and I'll open it up for a brief discussion from you guys here in just a minute. But let's talk about a few key points. And one of my points would be the Bryce Underwood bounce back from last week. Last week's 63-3 win over Central Michigan was a significant rebound from the disappointing loss to Oklahoma. Freshman quarterback Bryce Underwood was a dual threat force, showcasing his arm and legs for a dominant performance. The question is whether this was a true turning point for him or if he'll face a different challenge against a more formidable Big Ten opponent when they face Nebraska this week. Another thing to think about would be offensive identity. After the Oklahoma game, there were questions about the offense's predictability. Central Michigan came and showed a more balanced and explosive attack, but it was against a less talented opponent, obviously, with the way the score was. Michigan's true identity may be in a run-heavy team with a generational talent at quarterback who can open up the passing game with his running ability, but that remains to be seen again against better competition, Jared. And then the other thing I'll bring in is the Sharon Moore factor. The head coach still serving his suspension. The win came against CMU with a different coach, Biff Poggi, I think. Is that how it's pronounced?
Yeah, yep.
As the interim coach, the team's performance against a Big Ten opponent, unlike Nebraska, will be a more accurate gauge of their readiness to compete without Moore on the sideline. So I'll open it up to Mr. Michigan himself first. Tom, after all of that, do you think they've turned a corner? Is there more work to be done? Do they have an identity?
I mean, they played the Father Stallion School of the Blind last week, right? I mean, it's tough to say. I mean, they did exactly what you would expect a solid Division I Big Ten school to do against a MAC team. I mean, they laid the wood to them. I still have questions about Bryce Underwood. And the thing I just say about him, no question, he's a talented young player. What's difficult is, and it's so fitting that they're playing Nebraska this week, because Dominic Raiola was exactly where Bryce Underwood is last year, right? It's the same. He was a generational kind of talent. I mean, he was a highly touted recruit, lots of talent. Weird, but hey, look, Caleb Williams, weird can win you some football games, apparently. So he struggled. Nebraska struggled. He's a year removed from that, a year of snaps and reps. Unfortunately for Bryce, there's really nobody else. I think if Michigan had a choice, they would have probably played weeks and had him as an understudy. But in the era of NIL, and you're paying a kid millions of dollars, I mean, there's going to be the impetus to put him in the game. And they don't have an identity. The bigger question isn't even the freshmen. The bigger question is the offensive line. They don't dominate. They don't frighten me. We're going to have a really good idea, like you alluded, to how good they are and what their identity is or is not when we get out of this weekend.
Yeah, I'll quickly to you, Jared, about the coaching thing. There was some rumors or talk about was Michigan being held back, was Underwood being held back, and then you got Poggi that comes in, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, this was the offense everyone had been waiting to see since the first practice or whatnot. So is it a coaching thing, or is it just the beginning of a freight train getting ready to roll down the tracks?
I really do think it's the beginning of a freight train. I think you've seen enough flashes from a guy who has been hardly 5 weeks illegally being able to vote. I mean, this guy especially turned 18. August 11th was his birthday. He's a young man, and I mean,
can you vote yet?
Yeah,
Okay,
I can vote.
You're a young-looking fella.
But,
so
I think that, and I actually kind of would say this real quick to disagree with Tom. I think Michigan's flaw right now is their identity is too obvious. Everyone knows all they want to do is run the ball. Like, if they could have their way, they just want to run the ball. Just give it off to Haynes and just let the other, I can't think of the other guy, but just let their running back room just dominate. That's what they want. And the issue is their offensive line play has not been as dominant along with their dominance of the backs. And I think against Central Michigan, them showing, hey, we're still Michigan, and Bryce Underwood, he can beat you in multiple ways. He could be our, this is early to say, but our Lamar Jackson, our just like X factor, a guy in the backfield that can beat you in every single way, slice you up, take it for 50 yards, and break 10 tackles on that way. I think that, they're going to be successful. I think the next upcoming years.
Well, moving on to the Michigan State side of things, I'll bring Charles in for that, and I'm sure he's foaming at the mouth for a comment about the Spartans. Mixed feelings still, I believe, after the win. While the 41-24 victory over Youngstown State pushed them to 3-0, I think there are still lingering concerns. Defense gave up some big plays and struggled to get a clean performance throughout the whole game, which has raised questions about their readiness for Big Ten play. Aiden Child's continued progression. Again, we see improvements. He's been a bright spot, pulling out impressive numbers and showing off his dual threat capabilities. Is there an identity crisis on defense is probably what I may get into Charles with about Jonathan Smith's team. They've been solid against the run, but they've struggled in the passing game. And their true identity, especially on the defensive side of the ball, will be tested against USC this week, who is ranked 25th, and they've got the utmost lottery winnings of going over and playing a West Coast game in the evening time. I believe that's an 11 p.m. kickoff. But that game will be a key indicator of whether the Spartans' early wins a sign of progress or just a result of a weaker schedule. So, Charles, are they a proponent of their schedule, or are they 3-0 legit?
Well, ultimately, you can only play the teams that you have on your schedule. So I think getting the win versus Boston College was an absolute necessity for Jonathan Smith and the rest of that just coaching staff, players that are getting high-dollar NIL deals. I think that game was absolutely necessary to have. This game right here is a true litmus test to, is this program legitimate? If you go back and look at what Jonathan Smith did in year 2 at Oregon State, boom, he put a bullet in Oregon. He knocked off the Ducks, which was a huge upset, and that's something that the Spartans, if they can go to USC and win the Spartans versus Trojans shootout, I mean, you're looking at an 18-point underdog going on the road, playing in an 11 p.m. time slot, an East Coast team going to the West Coast. Obviously, it's going to be completely changing up their internal clock and their rhythm and all the different things that they do to get ready and prepared for a game. If they can go out there and get the W, I think that would be a program-shifting win in terms of the outlook for this particular season. I think it takes them from a 6-6 outlook to an 8-4 outlook because of the momentum that this win would generate and how it would impact the team's feeling inwardly going forward. Teams don't really care about the external noise. These kids are 20, 21 years old. Like, they have a sense of what people are saying about them. But if you go out and get this win, if you're Michigan State, you go out and get this win, they're not going to care what people are saying about them because they're going to have that internal confidence to be able to weather the storm. And then if you look at the schedule after this, you get UCLA at home in a couple weeks. That's one that you just start salivating at. That's homecoming. You like the chances of them winning that game. So, if you knock off both of the Los Angeles teams, hey, you got your shot. You're now 5-0. And I'm just going to say right now, I mean, if you beat SC, UCLA is a BOGO. I said it.
Well, it's funny that you bring up UCLA also because there have been some words and rumors floating around, and I don't know if this would have any issues within the Spartan team or whatnot. Jonathan Smith has been linked to possibly leaving again, maybe for the West Coast. Does that have a factor within the morale of the team, getting ready for a big West Coast game like that, or is that something they just kind of put behind them and they're just getting ready to play?
I mean, personally, if you ask me, as a Spartan alumni and as someone who bleeds green, you see me right here, I got my Sparty over my shoulder. Some people have their guardian angels over their shoulder. I got Sparty. That's how big of a Michigan State fan I am because
Poor guy.
if Jonathan Smith wants to leave, the door's open. I'm not going to hold him to any type of agreement that he's got. I mean, for the last 4 or 5 years, our program has been an absolute joke. Actually, since 2018, our program's been a joke. Yeah. So, we're going on our 8th year of people making jokes. I mean, we're almost past the career tenure of Jimmy Kimmel, and he just got let go, too. So, one of the things that our program is really suffering from right now is just not being able to always get consistent recruiting, consistent coaching, and then consistent play among different levels of the field. You look at our defense. Okay, a couple of years ago, we had really good defensive back play, and then it would shift, and our linebackers were bad. Shout out Brady Pretzloff, Gaylord, Michigan, 2023 graduate, playing linebacker, starting at linebacker for Michigan State. But right now, our linebacking core is not where it needs to be in order for us to compete to win a Big Ten championship, more or less win more than 8 games. Our defensive line, forget about it. They're not there. They're just not able to get consistent pressure on the passer, and they're not able to stay with gap integrity in terms of their rush lanes, or the quarterback can break, contain. Youngstown State's quarterback looked like a potential guy to transfer into D1 and play great after the tape that he put out against Michigan State last week. So all of those things combined, if Jonathan Smith wants to leave, Eric, I just don't see what he's put on tape for Michigan State to want to keep him.
No, and I was just curious because you pretty much explained it the way I had hoped to, because we've traded in so many coaches lately. Since D'Antonio's left, it really hasn't been a stable program, so to speak, in my words. So it'd be nice to have a stable person there that's wanting to be there, wants to be there for a long time. You're not going to get some type of Tom Izzo-like probably on the football field, but you want to find somebody like that can change the culture, kind of like Mark D'Antonio did.
Well, I almost think too with Michigan State, if he doesn't turn it around, if they're not better than 6-6, I wouldn't be surprised if he's run out. To be quite honest with you, I think the Spartans fans are not going to be happy with anything around that 6-6 mark. There's a lot of promising signs for that defense. Charles said it with, Brady Pretzloff is redshirt freshman this year from Gaylord High School. Looks great, as a young guy. I mean, he looks like he belongs on that field.
Yep.
And he's only going to get better. So, I don't know. It takes a little while for those anybody, defensive or offensive line, takes a couple of years to get them going, and that's where Michigan's having problems too.
Well, thanks, guys, for the input on Michigan and Michigan State. We're going to take another break, and when we come back, we're going to dive into the world of boxing real quick. Tom Clemenson's going to talk about the recent boxing card that we had and promoting. Are the cards and the promoting, are they on the up and up? Tom will have a report on that after we have a break from the Lake House and TBC, Traverse City Cherry Capital Airport. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hi, it's Kevin Klein from TVC Airport. We're proud to help keep you connected to high school sports in Northern Michigan, so you can stay in the game all season long with TVC, your Northern Michigan connection.
With unique gifts, home accessories, wedding items, and so much more, the Lake House on Bridge Street offers so many things to make your home or even your visit to Charlevoix that much more special. When you want beautiful items that reflect Charlevoix the beautiful, stop in or visit them online at thelakehousecharlevoix.com for your own keepsake and your own personal memory of Charlevoix.
Welcome back to the Next Level Broadcasting Show. At this time, we're going to take a few minutes and we're going to switch and go into the world of boxing. Tom Clemenson just watched a tremendous card recently and had some insight and some things that he wanted to talk about. So, Tom, the floor is yours.
I'll tell you, I'm a big boxing fan, and we were talking pre-show about, hearkening back to the days of ABC's Wide World of Sports, and how great it was to watch Larry Holmes fight Muhammad Ali when we were kids. Leonard, Hearns, Hagler, all those fights, and this was what we expected. We were just accustomed to. And then for a long time, somewhere in the 1980s, Bob Arum and Don King kind of get into the promotion business, and a lot of those great fights were just no longer available. They were hidden behind pay-per-view, and you get situations where promoters, and in case of Bud Crawford, his recent fight, Bob Arum didn't want to put him in the ring with anybody because he knew that that was basically going to be the end of that prospect. It's almost like football in college, where if you lose a game, you're kind of done. And boxing was like that, right? And so you've got this alphabet soup, WBA, WBO, WBC, et cetera, and promoters who were risk averse in terms of putting together fights that fans would care about. And if they did ever get those fights, they were hidden behind, a $100 pay-per-view channel. And this is in 1990s and 2000s money, so that was a lot of money. But what we saw this last weekend was Canelo Alvarez, undisputed champion against Terrence Crawford, Bud Crawford, undisputed champion in 2 different weight classes at the time. He'd been asking for that fight and finally got the chance to have that fight. Now, what was great about that fight was it was preceded by an undercard that was even more tremendous. So Netflix hosted this. It was basically sponsored by WWE, UFC, Dana White, very much involved in putting this card together.
Yeah, I believe that big organization above all that is called TKO now these days.
That's right. And so you had the Saudi minister of sport who bankrolled this thing, and they had it in Las Vegas, and the stadium is sold out. But what really impressed me from a guy who just absolutely loves to watch boxing was the fight card from the bottom to the top, super competitive. You had undefeated, not prospects, but potential contenders putting their record and their reputation on the line to fight. They also took a little page out of the UFC playbook and gave them performance bonuses. So you weren't going to get a journeyman to come in, sign the contract, and then get on his bicycle for 12 rounds. It was 8, 10, and 12 rounds of very, very competitive boxing. You didn't see knockouts in the undercard. That was on the Netflix portion, but it was impressive. Good action fighting, and on the Netflix side of the house, it was the 3rd or 4th highest viewed show boxing match of all time, 41 million.
And that's kind of what we were talking about, with the uprising or upping of promotions and gates and whatnot. Is what do you do or use to gain that revenue? And Netflix or streaming services that are more global seem to be the way to go these days. Like I mentioned, the WWE and UFC are both under TKO. Right. WWE does a lot of their stuff overseas now, Saudi Arabia and whatnot. And if anybody watches wrestling, the overseas crowds are way better and active than the USA crowds. And plus the UFC, you had Fight Island overseas. That was during COVID and whatnot too. So you got a lot of Saudi involvement in a lot of sports these days.
You do. I mean, you've seen it with golf. The PGA kind of got stale, and Liv just rocked the boat big time. And I really feel like what we saw this past weekend was kind of a precursor to what could happen for boxing, where the W soup is kind of put off to the side. If you had a UFC or an MMA style model where you've got a league or a sanctioning body that pits the best against the best, we don't care if you've got some losses on your record. It's the best fighters fighting the best fighters in their prime or as they're coming up. They're just good matchups. And that's the magic behind UFC, and that's what boxing fans have long wanted, but they can't get. I mean, think about Mayweather-Pacquiao. That fight was 5 years after it needed to happen. Well past, these guys were both past their prime. The question will never be answered whether Mayweather could have actually fought and won Manny Pacquiao in his prime, because by the time they got around to taking the risk, so to speak, all the risk was taken out of it.
Well, thank you, Tom, for the insight into the world of boxing and overseas and promoting and whatnot in the future of possibly where all the money is going to be coming from. And obviously, we're streaming online, too. The world of streaming is just blowing up all over the place. We're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, we're going to dive into Detroit Lions football after a message from our friend Orion Beningo and Pro Seamless Gutters. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Orion Beningo, but you might know me for my business, Professional Seamless Gutters, where we specialize in, you guessed it, everything gutters. New installation, replacements, cleaning, leaf guards, rain chains, and much more. But unlike many service providers, when you call Professional Seamless Gutters, you get me, Orion, not some bum intern or call center recording. So when you're contemplating any services regarding the gutters on your home or pole barn, think Professional Seamless Gutters.
Welcome back to the Next Level Broadcasting Show. Eric Huffman, Tom Clementson, Jared Stamen, Charles Strail in studio this week. Right now, going into the world of NFL and Detroit Lions football. You know, after a disappointing Week 1 loss to the Packers, the Lions bounced back in a big way, routing the Chicago Bears 52-21 at home. Obviously, home field advantage has its bonuses. You know, an offensive explosion. Offense is firing on all cylinders, putting up over 500 total yards. Jared Goff, highly efficient, throwing for over 330 and 5 touchdowns. The running game finally got revived after a week off. You know, the offensive line looked more like the offensive line of last year. You know, the team rushed for 177 yards. Gibbs and Montgomery each finding the end zone. And we also had improvements on defense. You know, they stepped up, recording 4 sacks and forcing 2 turnovers. Brian Branch was another standout, although we've got an undisclosed injury by him. You're not sure what he's going to be like going into the weekend, but still a great game by Brian Branch. He's the one that got there and hit that fumble on DeAndre Swift, I believe, there during the game. So that was a nice bonus on a former Lion. The other injury to note right now would be Marcus Davenport with a shoulder injury.
Shocker.
Yeah, no kidding.
But going into the Ravens game this week, you know, the Lamar Jackson challenge, it's the ultimate test for the Lions defense, I think, because they normally struggle against dual threat quarterbacks. So obviously this is a great test to see where they actually are after a so-so Week 1 and what we thought they were supposed to look like in Week 2. So, Tom, I'll just start from my way and work it on the way over. What do you expect this week from the Lions and the Ravens on Monday Night Football at Baltimore, where the Lions don't have a very good record against the Ravens?
This is just like the same problem we have trying to figure out what is Michigan this year, right? So you play a really good Packers team in Week 1. Probably the best team in the NFC North, to be quite honest with you. They get kind of drubbed around a little bit, and then they play, you know, the Saint Bartholomew School of the Blind the following week at home, and just absolutely wreck them. Well, the defense, 4 sacks. What, the fourth quarter, I think, is when they got most of those pressures and sacks? Right. So if you watch the sideline like I did, Caleb Williams is out of the game, obviously, and the life was gone from that team. Somewhere around just after halftime, the Bears were finished. They were done. And so that game didn't tell me a lot, to be honest with you. What it told me, actually, was that Brad Holmes did not do nearly enough in the offseason for that defensive line. To think that Marcus Davenport was going to be your answer. He has not played a healthy half a season in his career. And this is the guy who's going to... Zadarius Smith.
Easy now. Easy.
I mean, where is he? In Tennessee?
I believe the Eagles picked him up, actually.
The Eagles, somebody not named Detroit picked him up, and he would have been just fine.
Yeah.
At least he stays healthy. At least he shows up. What's the first ability that's most important in any sport? Availability.
Well, they had a decent run defense, but are they able to take care of not just Lamar Jackson, but Derrick Henry, too?
But do they have a decent run defense? Do they? I don't know that they do. And we've seen throughout, even last year when they were really good, they didn't have to face a lot of super threatening running quarterbacks. But look, they're going to get their fair share this coming Sunday, and I don't know that they're ready. I don't know that they're ready. I do not think, especially if Branch, who is one of the best in coverage and one of the best, you bring him up out of the safety position and get him into the box, even on a blitz or on a run blitz, he's tremendous. You cannot afford to have him out.
Well, Jared, let's swing over to the offensive side for you. This could be a high-scoring game with these two offenses if they both have, are running their full arsenal. Jared Goff will need to continue his elite play, and the offensive line will need to hold up, just kind of like they did last week. Showing their true form. And the Lions will look to exploit the middle of the field, obviously, with Amon-Ra St. Brown and their two dynamic running backs. But could this be a battle of scoring?
Yeah, I really do think at the end of the day that's what we're going to see. As a Bengals fan, I've watched this team play at least twice every year for pretty much my whole life. And within the last couple of years, one thing I can say about the Ravens is as long as you stay within striking distance of this team, you have a shot to win. I mean, we saw it in Week 1 with the Bills, and this happens every year. It's been for about 3 years that they give up 2 to 3 just major wins teams that they have the game set away. And you think, oh, Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, they'll run out the clock. They get stopped. They don't do it. I really think as long as Detroit stays in, it's going to be offensive battle. I think Ravens are going to come out first, and as long as the Lions can come, claw their way back in, I think that's what we're going to see happen.
Charles, I'll quickly put this question to you before we take our last break. The Lions are currently an underdog and playing at Baltimore after a lackluster first week and then a dominating performance the week after. Could a win solidify them and getting them back into a lot of the polls that everyone took them back out of after week one?
So here are my thoughts on that. You go to Baltimore and win, then you come home, you got a game versus the Cleveland Browns, and then after that you go to Cincinnati without Joe Burrow, and then you go to Kansas City and Arrowhead. So if you look at that stretch of games right there, if the Lions can beat the Ravens, you're potentially looking at them being 5-1 after 6 weeks. If you said, hey, look at these first 6 games on the schedule at the beginning of the season and said, hey, look, you're actually going to be 5-1 if you beat the Ravens. If you don't beat the Ravens, then you've got a chance to be 4-2. I think worst case scenario, the Lions now through 6 weeks have to have a positive outlook or a minimum outlook of being 3-3. If you lose to the Ravens on Monday Night Football, they're a 5.5-point underdog. Okay, I get it. You're favored to beat the Cleveland Browns. You'd be favored to beat the Cincinnati Bengals. Probably a 1.5-point underdog versus the Kansas City Chiefs. So that's a game that's a pick-em, toss-up game. So 3-3, 4-2 is, I think, well on the radar for the Detroit Lions this year after 6 weeks. And looking at that schedule in August when it came out, or I believe actually came out in April or May. But if you looked at it then and you said, whoo, man, they got the Browns and they got the Bears, and who knows, it could be a 2-4 start. But now I think you're feeling a lot better if you're just looking at the schedule, looking at the matchups that they have, looking at their health. I mean, outside of Davenport and Brian Branch, so far, the biggest thing for me is keeping Jared Goff healthy and upright, because that offense, they showed that when they can keep him up, and they used a lot more 2 tight end sets this past week versus the Bears. So keep an eye on that. And I think that might have been the key to unlock the running game for the Lions. They brought in Brock Wright, Sam Laporta, and just ran a lot of 2 wide receiver, 2 tight end, 1 running back personnel. And I think that might have really opened up their ability to get consistently good run fits. And we saw it on full display versus the Bears, but now we get to see it on full display versus the Ravens with a much better defensive line.
So I guess the question is, are the Lions, are they who we thought they were? I guess we'll find out Monday night. We're going to take one more break, and we'll come back and get into this week's high school games after a word from Bingham Insurance and TVC. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hi, it's Kevin Klein from TVC Airport. We're proud to help keep you connected to high school sports in Northern Michigan, so you can stay in the game all season long. TVC, your Northern Michigan connection.
Hey, Dad, brought you some popcorn. You should relax. You worked so hard for us.
What happened?
It's a little fender bender, but Mom already filed a claim with our agent, and we can track the status right from the app. Auto owners pays what they owe without any hassle.
Sounds like simple human sense. Well played.
Ask Bingham Insurance Services in Charlevoix if auto owners make sense for you.
Welcome back to the Next Level Broadcasting Show. Once again, Eric Huffman, Tom Clementson, Jared Stamen, and Charles Strail here giving you all the action tonight. And right now, our last segment for the night, getting ready for this week's games. And right now, we're going to start off with the first game, talk about Gaylord St. Mary is going to host 0-3 Bel Air.
Yes.
My question to you will be, is this anything less than another blowout?
Unfortunately for Bel Air, they've got some key injuries too that, I think it was going to be an uphill battle for them to begin with. It's just going to make it a more difficult game for them. We're still not sure about Nathan O'Connell, his availability. I think they're still keen to rest some guys. So I think we're going to see a lot of 2s and 3s again this week, which is great. The coaches are going to have a more opportunity to spend time with them in practice and then them to get game reps. And again, keep in mind, the focus for St. Mary is each practice one at a time, but the end goal is Ski Valley playoffs and see where we can go if we can get into a championship there. So.
And I think we've got, because we held them off for the latter part of the show today, I think we have an interview from from the St. Mary's coach.
Yeah, so I talked to Coach Kevin O'Connell a little bit about, how did he feel about the 2s and 3s stepping up against Forest Area and then getting ready for Bel Air. So that's what we talked about primarily.
There's going to come a point in time when we don't know when we're going to need them, either due to penalty, injury, attrition, something along those lines, where, it's easy to, well, the next guy up. Well, there's a huge difference between 1 and 2 and 1 and 3. So next and up. So if we can eliminate that space between 1 and 2, as far as talent level, as far as scheme goes, it's the same. So they have equal reps in individual. They have equal reps in our minimal team sessions. So the reps are there in practice, but as well as I do, game reps and practice reps are totally different. So relying on some of those kids to step in is huge for us.
Next, we'd like to get into the game that I'll be going to tomorrow. Elk Rapids are going to bring in 1 and 2 Sheboygan, and this is an interesting game. Charles had alluded to it earlier in the show tonight. Last year, it was a big night up in Sheboygan. They had taken their press box and dedicated it to a great sportscaster and radio personality up there. Mike Grisdale became the Mike Grisdale press box. But during that game, the Elk Rapids Elks up there playing them, and it was 23-0 at one point, and thinking that the game was pretty much over. And lo and behold, all of a sudden, Sheboygan comes out in the second half and decides, you know what? This is our turf. We're going to come out here and play some real football. Came all the way back and ended up beating them, I believe it was 30-23. And you should have seen, you would have thought they had won the Super Bowl. The stands and the people leaving and the cars leaving, the horns were honking and the people were cheering and throwing stuff in the air. It was a great atmosphere.
It was like 1980 Sheboygan.
Yes, it was. Yeah, the old-fashioned Sheboygan Chiefs. That's right, back in the old days of the Michigan Huron Shores Conference.
That's right.
Yeah. So will it be a revenge game for the people that were on Elk Rapids last year coming into this, the game that they should have had, and it could have brought them closer to a possible playoff position last year. So we'll see what type of game that is tomorrow. Again, Elk Rapids getting their first win last week and getting their first points as well. Can Braden Flutie and the boys come back and put some more points on the board and hold off a Sheboygan team, although 1 and 2 have played in some decent games already this year. And so we'll move on to the next one here. Charlevoix is going to entertain 1 and 2 Oscoda. The Raiders bringing the Owls in for a Friday evening, and Charlevoix coming in at 3-0. Oscoda, I think their one win was a pretty close game. All in all, I don't see this being anything other than another Starrett and Ian Moran show, and this possibly being another blowout. As Charlevoix keeps marching towards another playoff run as well. Charles, you got any insight onto that? As I think we have a coach interview for Charlevoix as well.
Yeah, we do have a quick little interview clip that we want to showcase here. I was able to catch up with Charlevoix head coach Don Jess after 3 weeks of their season. They're 3-0. They're ranked number 7 right now in Division 7. So we're going to go ahead and cue up a little bit of an informational interview that we had, similar to what Tom was able to do with head coach Kevin O'Connell with St. Mary. We're going to lead into this with head coach Don Jess from Charlevoix.
So at the conclusion of last year, yeah, I think both sides of the ball are so far so good. Obviously, defense only giving up 20 points, and yes, I would agree, defense does win championships. But also, the offensive line has been really doing a great job so far this year, controlling the line of scrimmage, and that's where it all starts. If you've got a really good offensive line that's dominating the game, you're going to have a really good chance to be successful. Yeah, we've got so many sophomores. It was hard to kind of figure out, how good we would be. We knew how things could go, and so far so good. The young guys have really stepped it up, and we've had really good senior leadership too, which is huge. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of kids I think that are playing well right now. Obviously Ian's doing really good, but that was kind of expected. We knew what we had with Ian. I would say if I had to pick one surprise so far this season, and I wouldn't call it a huge surprise, but somebody that's made the most of their opportunity is Andrew Grogan. He's our starting center, also starting, on the defensive line. And last year he was playing behind some really good players, and it's his turn this year, and he's been doing a heck of a job so far. He actually just got awarded our Lineman of the Week award for his performance last week against Tawas. So yeah, Andrew's doing a great job.
We thank Coach for taking the time for that interview, and good luck to them this week.
There's going to come a
We're going
point.
to get into our next game. East Jordan, now coming off their first loss of the year, is going to go to 2-1 Glen Lake. And I would think on paper for me that this would be a close game because you have two 2-1 teams. But Glen Lake's only loss is against a very nice-looking Traverse City St. Francis team. So Jared and Charles, since you two have seen Glen Lake, I'll pose this to you. What type of game do you expect out of this with an East Jordan team that we honestly think could still be 3-0, but again, two 2-1 teams facing off?
Yeah, so one of the things that's going to be kind of key going into this is the health of Max Beal. That's going to be a real game changer for East Jordan. I think that the Lakers, we did see in week one against St. Francis, as Eric alluded to, and they did look great. And one of the big flaws that they had was actually kind of more coaching issues. Before halftime, they decided to kind of play, risk the ball close to their end zone with like less than a minute left, and they ended up, getting a safety, and all the momentum that they kind of gained just went right over to St. Francis, and that kind of was really the turning point in that game, and they really never got the wheels turning again, and just a lot of the week one jitters, false starts, holding calls, those types of things kind of held them back. But it'll be interesting to see week 4. They've got 3 more weeks under their belt of playing, and East Jordan, like I said, they're a very good team. I think that we'll see a competitive match, a bit of a bloodbath. I think the Lakers have a bit of the edge, especially with Max Beal. If he is coming back, probably not 100%, but quite frankly, I think East Jordan has a real shot at coming out there and looking like a 3-1 and one of the best teams in D8.
I think it certainly will be a matchup decided by which team is able to control the line of scrimmage, right? We saw what East Jordan was able to do in that final possession when they just chewed up clock against Kalkaska, and they just said, hey, we're going to go ahead and run this right down your throat. We're going to make sure that we inflict how we want to play against you right now. And we're just going to play smash mouth football, line it up, and just try to batter you down. And that's what East Jordan was able to do against Kalkaska. Unfortunately, they weren't able to execute the third part of the game, which is special teams. I think this game comes down to special teams. Who's able to make a game-altering play, whether it's a punt return, kickoff return, onside kick for East Jordan. We've seen that against Manistee, Jared. Which team is able to make a special play on special teams?
Yeah, and the edge would go to East Jordan there. So, that's going to be a good matchup. We're excited to watch that one tomorrow.
As long as they figure out that kickoff.
Yeah.
and the thing is, I think the kickoff they've got figured out. I just think that it was the coverage on the pooch kick. That ball was caught at the 40-yard line by Kalkaska and returned roughly 60 yards for a touchdown. And I think East Jordan is much more accustomed to either fielding a very, very long kick, kicking it as far as you can, kicking it deep, and the onside kick coverage, which they've pretty much perfected with their 2-kicker guessing game. The defense has to determine who's going to actually kick off, and then that's kind of what East Jordan's bread and butter is. And it'll be interesting to see how they've addressed that special teams and the kickoff situation after it cost them that game versus Kalkaska. And I'm sure head coach Adam Grabowskis wouldn't say that they lost that game because of that kickoff. He'd probably say, there are a multitude of other plays throughout the course of a game. And Eric, you can allude to this with your coaching experience. You never lose the game because of one play, but you can certainly not win the game because of one play.
Yeah, for sure. And thanks for the insight. Let's move on to our last game on the next level docket. Traverse City St. Francis is home this week with 1-2 Grayling. And I saw them both play last year, and from my standpoint, I don't know if I see this any other than the running clock game that I saw last year. But Charles, you will be doing this game this week, won't you? So I'll come right back to you for your insight for the Gladiators and Vikings.
Yeah, so Gladiators and Vikings, I got actually a stat that's going to shock you.
Don't you have an interview too?
I got an interview with head coach Josh Sellers that I want to include, but here's the stat. All time, the two schools, they've met 23 times. Does anybody want to guess the Gladiators' all-time record versus the Grayling Vikings?
23-0.
23-0. I hear 23-0 from Tom. Anybody else?
I think it's hard not to guess 23.
21-2.
Okay, so, and I misspoke. This will be the 23rd time they play. So St. Francis is 22-1 versus Grayling. And
I knew they had gotten them at least once.
So they're going in there with a lot of reputation to try and uphold, and I think that Josh Sellers is able to kind of allude to this in the interview that I did with him earlier on this week. So let's go ahead and take a look at that now.
So at the conclusion of last year, I've been saying the same thing for people that have asked, how's the coach, how's the team going to be this year? And it's the same answer over and over. It was, we are going to be a talented group of young men with not a lot of game experience, and that really showed in week one. We had a sloppy win over a good Glen Lake team. Got it together a little bit in week two, beating a Ogama Heights team that's going to win a lot of football games this year. And then still have ways to go to clean some things up, but I would say it's about par for the course. Yeah, I think the name that pops into my head right away would be Ethan Daziak as a senior running back and linebacker. He's already had a game with 3 touchdowns scored, and he's just been impressing us with his explosiveness into the hole, making some good cuts, and his breakaway speed. I think he's definitely be at the top of that list. But Oliver Jaworski, an undersized two-way lineman, especially on defense, has really embraced the role of being just a gnat and somebody who just frustrates bigger offensive linemen. I think Gage Walter, who got some starting time last year at guard because of an injury, but he's contributed more now defensively as well. And then I'll end with a young guy in Jacob Kraska. Physically, he doesn't look like he's out of place at all as a sophomore. He's playing great for us. Starting at a defensive end as a sophomore, that's quite an achievement. Yeah, definitely the offense is outpacing the defense right now. And I would say the cause of that is making some late in camp personnel changes on the defensive side of the ball in some key positions. So we take in already an experienced group of guys, and then we throw people into new positions. It's just a big learning curve, but the kids are eager to learn and to make our defense better each and every week. And we hope that we can do that against Grayling on Saturday.
Awesome, thank you.
And as always, we thank all the coaches for taking the time to grant us these interviews. We appreciate it so much during the season while you're trying to prepare for your opponents. And that's going to do it for our show this week. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget, check out all these games on nextlevelbroadcasting.net. You can go right there and watch all the games at once, or you can go on there and click on the little YouTube thing. You can go right to the YouTube channel and watch those games as well. Don't forget to go to YouTube and subscribe to the Next Level Broadcasting channel as well. For any Gaylord St. Mary's games, you can go to Gaylord St. Mary's Athletics and subscribe to that for the Snowbirds games. Also, where I'll be at for Elk Rapids, elkrapidsfootball.com. You go on there, click the Watch Live, and it'll take you right to the link to be able to watch Elk Rapids football. Tom, you're going to be at which game tomorrow?
So we're Gaylord St. Mary's at home against Bel Air. Catch the opening kickoff. It's the Huddy Special.
I will be at Elk Rapids for the Elks taking on Sheboygan. Jared, you will be?
I will be at Glen Lake watching East Jordan play the Lakers.
And Charles?
Yeah, I'll be Saturday at Traverse City St. Francis versus Grayling. And we do want to mention Shane Smith will be live in Charlevoix for Charlevoix versus Oscoda.
A couple more things to mention before we sign off. Don't forget, get on the chat line on the YouTube channels, not only for our show that we do each week here on Thursday, but also during the games. reach out to us. Let us know if your favorite player is playing, and we'll give them a shout out, or just to say good job, guys. Just to talk to us if you want to. We had some chats tonight. Mr. Nick Wenzel chimed in tonight. Thanks for chiming in, Nick. We had somebody doing yoga saying, hey, I'm doing yoga and I'm watching you. So we appreciate wherever you are watching the Next Level Broadcasting Show. And the last thing to add in, all of the highlights that you see every week are on the Next Level Broadcasting Instagram page. So go to our Instagram page and you can see all the highlights from your favorite teams every week. Again, thank you so much for joining us on the Next Level Broadcasting Show. We will see you at the games tomorrow night. Take care.